Q&A day, number 1. All right, guys, this is going to be a Q&A thing. I get a lot of emails through the channel and through my own website asking me all different kinds of questions. I've written a few of them down. I'm going to try and tackle real quick. The first one is gear, or the first series of questions will be gear. What gear, what DAW do you use? I use Pro Tools. I have that up right now because I'm somewhat prepared for this. Pro Tools, I use Logic. I use a little bit of Studio One. I've learned how to use it a little bit, and it's a good program. I use, if you want to count them as DAWs, I guess I use Reason, the original one with all the sequencing and all that stuff, but I've never used it for audio. I learned Paris years ago. I learned Studio Vision. I learned Performer to a certain degree. It's a nightmare, but as far as, you know, how many different platforms you can wind up learning during the course of your career. Pro Tools is my go-to at this point, and it has been since, God knows, like, you know, 20 years at least, something around there. I was an early adopter on the digital thing. I think I've talked about it a little bit. I'm just gonna go through the next thing, which is what plugins do you use all the time? The easiest way for me to go through this, I decided, was I'll just go through the categories by manufacturer, sort of. I use the Avid stuff, the stuff that comes with Pro Tools. I use the compressor, the chorus, the distortion, the 1176, auto pen, definitely lo-fi, the SansAmp once in a while, Studio Verb, Deverb. I definitely use them, and they're definitely still usable. Particularly like the compressor DYN3 compressor limiter, good stuff. I have tons of stuff dialed in for that I use for some real quick stuff, and you know, they don't use a lot of DSP, so it's used to your advantage. Melodyne, definitely use that. I got way into that last year during the pandemic. Was it last year? No, 2020 and 2021. I'm a big Melodyne freak. I know how to do all kinds of crazy stuff that I'd like to think that I may have come up with some of it, but I do some weird stuff with harmonies and harmony building, and one of these days I'll go down that rabbit hole once I get this whole thing worked out as far as using my screen and recording it and doing some tutorials. I'm having trouble the past few days trying to record in stereo. So when I figure that out, and I will start doing those type of things. But there's no point in mono because you just don't get the effect of how things work spatially, and you know, what some of the sounds are actually doing if they're not in stereo. Eventide, I definitely use, Crystals, Quadravox. I do some weird stuff with Quadravox that I'd like to probably show off. Shimmerverb, one of my favorites. Undulator, I use a little bit. Shimmerverb I use a lot. Isotope I use tons of. Obviously the Ozone stuff for all my mix bus things. Vinyl I use Nectar occasionally. Nectar I can do some fun stuff. A lot of the stuff I do to just sort of like keep myself entertained. Like, you know, it's like new inspiration. You you kind of you know, you get to a certain point. With any of these tools, you can, when you get to a certain point, you can get what you want out of them, and even though they all do a lot of the same thing. Cashmere, I've used that guy's kick enhancer thing. It's pretty cool. KSHMR, he's from Splice fame, and Splice I rock also. I don't know if I consider that a platform, but it's definitely something that's unbelievably important. I got turned on to it by Josh Harris in St. Louis, and then I inflicted upon him Scalar, which is another thing that I use. Plug-in Alliance, Acme Opticom compressor I use, BX stuff, Clean Sweep, BX Console, SSL 4000E is like my go-to channel strip. Besides channel strip from Avid, Vertigo from Plug-in Alliance, then Plug-in Boutique. Scalar's a deep composition tool thing. Yeah, I don't know if it's not worth it for me to do any type of tutorials. If you're into learning something really, really futuristic and interesting and powerful, check out Scalar. I think Scalar eventually will be a DAW in itself. I use Reason Rack plugin, love it. I use it to stack different synths and stuff and effects and use it all the time. I've been a big Reason fan forever. Slate Digital Fresh Air, I think it was a free plugin, so I grabbed it. It's sort of BS. It's like a little psychoacoustic processor. Universal Audio. I mean, several of those things, namely I use the Distressor from UA and a few other things. I use the Lexicon 224. That's like my favorite reverb, my go-to reverb. Waves, SSL Comp. I've recently added that. Well, not recently, a couple of years. It's a SSLG bus compressor. I use it all the time on the bus before Ozone. XLN Audio, one of my favorite companies. I use the Addictive Trigger, Addictive Drums, Retro Color. Ulean is a free thing. I think it is free. I use that for the loudness meter, but I don't really get into worrying about that much anymore. My stuff's so dialed in with Ozone, and I've tested it so many different ways on things like, on Spotify and stuff, that I don't run into any volume issues or volume war problems. Sound Toys. Sound Toys, I use a ton of stuff. I use Crystallizer, Devil Lock, Echo Boy, Filter Freak, Alter Boy, Microshift, Little Plate. I mean, there's not much I don't use. I guess I use everything. And my favorite part of it is the effects rack. And a lot of guys sleep on effects rack. I use effects rack all the time. I have that as one of my sends. So this one is it's built off of their Large Lush Verb preset, which I use presets as starting places sometimes, or like sometimes I'll dial through some presets, particularly like with Sound Toys or Effects Rack, just to see if something idea-wise strikes me as something interesting that I could kind of toy with a little bit. Sound Toys. And I'll go off of that, and then sometimes I'll just save that preset as a new preset that's tweaked by me, and I go from there. But I like using presets. I don't think there's anything wrong with using them as starting points. I don't agree with grabbing a, R&B vocal EQ preset or some bullshit like that or whatever, because that doesn't make any sense to me. But like effects, I mean, why not dial through a bunch to see like if someone's got some crazy ideas on delays, hitting reverbs, hitting pitch transposers and all that kind of stuff. It's fun, and it's supposed to be fun. So the effects rack is a big deal. I use MPC Beats, the Akai MPC Beats plugin for some occasional drum stuff or drum sequencing. I don't really use it for sequencing per se, but it's a fun plugin. I just saw it. Here's Channel Strip. Channel Strip I use a lot. Let's see if we can get the camera. Yeah, there it is. Channel Strip I use a lot. I mean, it's a nice, functional, working tool that doesn't use a lot of DSP, and, give it a shot. Monitors. I'm using these M Audio BX5 things, which I guess, there it goes. There, we'll look at this one. The BX5 M Audio speakers. I bought them probably about 5 years ago. I walked in the Guitar Center in Manhattan and said, man, I need to spend some money, for God knows whatever reason. I saw these speakers. They were on like some sort of like blowout deal thing. I think because this model was then replaced by the newer one with the like a rectangular looking tweeter. I think they were $120 for the pair, powered. So I thought, well, maybe I'll just grab these and use them as beaters in my studio when I don't want to tear up my NHTs or whatever else I was using at the time. I was just shocked at how much I like them, and I continue to like them. And it's the only thing I use now here in my production room and mix room. And then, of course, for low frequency stuff and maybe, more heavy scrutiny, I'll go to my headphones, which are Sony MDR V6s, which I believe are the 7506s now. And I use the Even Audio headphones for a long time now, which are no longer available, sadly, but I have several pairs. I have a pretty good stash, and I'm in good shape with that. Guitars. I mean, I could do a huge rundown of guitars, I have everything that I need to at my disposal. I have a Grote or Grote semi-hollow body ES-125 copy. I have my Gretsch Setzer 1994 signature model that I got in Hollywood in 2000. It was all beat up. And of course, I saw a good deal. Possibly, this is the Gretsch. It's probably my favorite guitar. I would have to say this would be the Deserted Island guitar. I know it. Some people say Desert Island. It's not Desert Island. It's Deserted Island. Don't forget that. I have my Mike Dirnt Fender P-Bass that I believe I got at Guitar Center in Queens here, and I've yet to go into it since I've moved to Astoria. Then I have my Gibson Les Paul, or Gibson Les Paul, whatever anyone likes to call it. You make the call. It's a beauty. Plays wonderful. I put a cheap Seymour Duncan pickup in the bridge for when I want to rock out. We're going to continue on this guitar tour. I'll probably do something a little more in detailed soon. But anyway, this is the Eddie, the Bumblebee. I mean, yeah. Eddie. I have my Telecaster that my aunt bought for me several years ago now, and it's one of my favorite guitars. This one I'll never get rid of. As some guitars come and go, there's probably the front row of guitars that will never leave, and the Telecaster is one of them. The Gretsch, probably my Yamaha Martin knockoff. I have a couple of crazy guitars over there. The Harmony Hollywood. Let's see if we can keep this thing tracking. Got me back. This is the Harmony Hollywood. I'm in the process of kind of getting this thing back in shape. It's got a lot of issues like that, but it doesn't really affect the sound too much. Not judging by that, but it does sound good plugged in. This is another cool guitar. Another cool guitar is the Silvertone. This one is also in the state of repair a little bit right now. But it is a 1956, I believe, or 58. The Harmony is a 58, I believe, also. 58, that number's been coming up often this year for me. Here's my somewhat, friends who know me know this guitar pretty well because I've used this on quite a few recordings. It's a Yamaha Martin Lawsuit guitar from like 68, and it's just incredible. You wouldn't know by that. I don't know what's going on with that cape up. Oops. Oh yeah, the next thing I was asked about was my favorite mix engineers. Okay, so a little background to it, a few of them. I only have a handful, although I do like a lot of other people's work. Bob Clearmountain's my favorite. If you are in the recording game or in the mix game, or in this industry, you would probably know his name, and you definitely know his work. You know Start Me Up by the Stones. You'd know Reckless by Bryan Adams, that whole album, a bunch of the Bryan Adams stuff. I mean, everything in the 80s had something to do with Bob. Let's Dance, the David Bowie album, and famously the Avalon album by Roxy Music, which was like the go-to gold standard back in the 90s and even today, really. If you wanted to check a room and see how it's tuned, take a listen to his pair of speakers and really get a feel. I mean, he just nailed it. The whole combination of the thing nailed everything sonically. And, it goes without saying that it also has to do with a lot of the players and the composition and the recordings, all those type of things. Bill Bottrell is another one of my favorites. Probably most well known for Tuesday Night Music Club, Sheryl Crow album. He was the producer. I believe he was like the mixer, but maybe not technically. It was engineered in his studio. I don't know all the nitty gritty on it. I just know I love his work. I've heard a lot of his stuff. Even the David Bearwald album that he did was another like industry standard for sonics, and a lot of people used it for tuning car stereos and stuff like that back in the day when you would add a new car stereo to your car. Daniel Lanois, Brian Eno, Steve Lillywhite, and Flood, that combination did the Octong Baby album for U2. Probably my favorite album ever in, you know, full scope, from the sonics to the production to the recording to the performances, the engineering, the mixing, all that stuff. I mean, that's my deserted island record probably. If I had to go somewhere and just say, I got one record to take with me, I mean, that's a tough one, but Octung Baby might be it. And then Gus Dudgeon and David Henschel from the Elton John fame, the Goodbye Yellow Brick Road stuff, Captain Fantastic, Brown Dirt Cowboy stuff. I mean, I could still listen to that today and just be in awe and want to quit, or keep going and keep searching for the sound. That, you know, that infamous sound that's in your head. There's a couple of others that come to mind. I mean, I don't know who did all these records, but, you know, there's some amazing. This is one of my other little gadgets that I love, is the Rocket Book, and it's got the erasable. It's an erasable pad. So, I mean, I think I've had this for a couple of years now, and to think that how much paper it's sort of saved, and you can write on it. It's like a whiteboard kind of thing. You can write on it and then erase it, as long as you use the right pen, the Frixion. You can also scan whatever you wrote and it'll turn it into a PDF and save that in the Rocket app. Fun. It's good stuff. Rocket Book. And this is the Everlast one, which is cool. I think that covers Q&A day, number 1.